Hey, welcome back to the virtual Father's Fridays, as we've done every Friday during the month of June to celebrate dads, fathers, and explore the journey of being a father, providing you resources during the month of June to kind of strengthen that bond with your kids and not just talk about the law and talk about strategy, which we do often during our podcast. If you hadn't subscribed to our podcast, you can do that by going to Apple iTunes. You can also check out our YouTube channel, which contains all of our previous virtual town halls and our podcasts and all kinds of information on our website at cordellcordell.com. And today is no different. We're fortunate to have wonderful guests today, and our special guest, which is the Art of Fatherhood. And we're joined by Eddy. Welcome, Art, to the show.
Thank you very much for having me. It's an honor to be here. And thank you for doing this thing, this Fatherhood Friday this month, man. This is fantastic. So I really appreciate what you guys are doing at the Art of Fatherhood, trying to raise all voices of dads and, showing that we're all not like the Homer Simpson dad. So what you're doing, I highly applaud your efforts and the message you guys are sending. So thank you.
And I think we'll talk about it. Hey, I'm glad to join you. Thanks for the shout out. And we sometimes stumble, right? We are that Homer Simpson. That's what the Art of Fatherhood is about. We'll talk about it, but we're also joined by the Cordell and Cordell attorney, who's a frequent guest on our virtual town halls and podcasts, Jessica Merrick out in Arizona. Welcome back, Jessica.
Thank you, Scott. I appreciate you inviting me on, and I'm really looking forward to getting to know Art and all that he's done. As you said, he's been doing a lot just for the community of fathers, and I'm really excited for this podcast.
Yeah. And so, I know everyone watching is going to have questions. You want to submit those in the Q&A section while we're talking. Any question, just give us a shout out on the Q&A section. We'll try to get to it we have 28 minutes left or so during the program, and we can toss those to Jessica, myself, or to Art and try to get you some answers, as we always do. Again, put those in the Q&A section. So as I said in the beginning, we've really focused each of these Fridays providing resources to fathers and talking about some uplifting things that are very different and unique from what we typically do in our podcasts and our town halls at Cordell and Cordell. And so let's talk about the Art of Fatherhood. Art, let's just talk about it. I mean, I found it, I checked it out before we went live, and I listened to your podcast, and I thought, Art of Fatherhood, that's pretty cool. And I thought, gosh, it struck a tone with me. I've got 5 kids, and I wish it was a science. I really do. And I think, whether you intentionally called it by your first name, Art of Fatherhood, or you meant that there's an art of, to it, and, in terms of everyone's unique. But first of all, tell us about your podcast. Tell us about the website. What is it? And I want people to start checking it out as we're talking now.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like the dad joke. You're always looking for some type of pun or funny type of like anecdote. And so the Art of Fatherhood, I'm going to go with that. And again, it's just a podcast, comes out every Monday. You can check it out wherever you get podcasts or artoffatherhood.net. And not only is a podcast there to embrace fatherhood and showcase everybody's different journey. We all know that the old adage that, parents used to tell us when we were growing up, it's like, you don't know what a person's going through until you walk a mile in their shoes. Right. And so sometimes you might judge, not sometimes, I think we all judge other parenting styles and skills and all that. But once you get to learn where people are from and their background, and did they have a great environment growing up? Did they break the cycle of not being there for their kids? Did this father and family have issues with actually having a child? Was there separation or divorce? Or there's different ways that each father has gone along their journey. And I just try and showcase and share that. And I think we all know this. If we see someone who is kind of struggling or experiencing good and bad, good or bad, the same thing, it's like, oh, I'm not alone. And once you kind of feel included, that's what the Art of Fatherhood is about. Showcasing good fatherhood, not just in the podcast. I have a Dad's Doing It Right column every Tuesday. And then Thursdays, as you can tell, I like to collect things. And so other dads and moms showcase what they're, doing. And then Wednesdays, like either a serious, or a sponsored article. And then I kind of do on Fridays the Fatherhood Friday theme as well, where I just kind of showcase what happened that week in the Art of Fatherhood. So it's really fun to talk to a lot of great dads around the world and just kind of see their take on, becoming a dad and, the values and lessons they're looking to instill into their kids. And on the flip side, the lessons that they've learned from their kids.
No doubt. I mean, I think you'd think, for me, I have 5 kids, and every one of them are so different and unique. Their challenges are different. My parenting style, being a dad, is different with each of them. My oldest will tell you that it's different. I likened it to, I told him, being a parent or a dad is like having a mechanical pencil. You replace that lead. I'm out of lead by the time I got to my fifth kid. It just clicks, and I don't just do what you want, man. That's my art right there. But you've had some amazing guests on your podcast. Why don't you tell me who your favorite has been? I know it's hard to pick a favorite, or maybe better yet, who've been the most memorable guests? Because if you're watching, listening right now, and you don't know, check it out, artoffatherhood.net. There's some amazing guests you've had. Kind of give me some of your memorable ones and what they talked about.
Yeah, most recently, Vincent D'Onofrio, who's been in so many movies and TV series, and I got the chance to chat with him as he played. He played in Netflix. Now he's going to be doing something with Marvel, the role of Kingpin in the Daredevil series. And when he uses that iconic line or phrase, "When I was a boy," and it was just like, it sends chills down my back because he does it so well. But he also had he got a children's book that was inspired by a Twitter kind of like thread that he had about how pigs can't look up. And it's like, can we help people that, it's about like this one girl that helps this pig look up into the stars by, creating a ramp for the pig to like look up at the stars. And it's kind of like, we should treat each other well. And like, no matter what side of the political faith spectrum that you're on, we all have fundamental things that we all are alike in. And I love that. And that's a great thing to teach your kids. Mark Hamill, as you can tell, Star Wars geek, got a chance to chat with him. And he said one of his favorite things as a father is that his kids still want to be his friends. And they still, after they left the nest, they come back and they hang out. Jeff Foxworthy said the best thing to do is listen to your kids, no matter what age they are, see what they're, just don't ask yes or no questions. Learn more by just listening to them and seeing what they're truly about in each step of their generation, or each, step of the years, whether, a toddler, a kid, tween, teenager, and so forth. And so that was cool. And he was one of the people I was mentioning about breaking the cycle. Like his dad was long gone, and he wanted to be there for his kids. So when he was starting to make a name for himself, he'd fly out somewhere, do stand up, then come home on a red eye and make sure he was able to take his kids to school. So you see a lot of people, not only with a passion for their career, but a passion for fatherhood, or even a bigger passion for fatherhood. So those were ones that really stuck out to me.
Yeah.
That's awesome. I, like Scott, I also have 5 kids, and as a working mom, I can tell you how important it is. And my husband has been in my life, having that father figure and the value that he adds, because we're totally different, right? The mother's parent different than fathers, and in many ways. And so it's been so important, I know, for myself. And I know that we have a comment on the side here. Ryan says, from Minnesota, wanted to say Art Eddy is someone I found an awesome podcaster. So you are definitely a major influence, it sounds like, across the country. And I've listened to a couple of your podcasts. What specifically inspired you to start the podcast? And tell us a little bit about your fatherhood journey.
Yeah, thank you for asking. So I was actually working with another group of people in the parenting space, and I just kind of wanted to see if I could start everything by myself. We kind of we had fun doing talking about fatherhood, talking about families and stuff. And then we just it was almost like the Beatles. We knew time was like, all right, we're going to go our separate ways. Right. But I was in the radio business. I was, on the programming side. I'd helped produce a morning show in New Jersey. And then when we had our second daughter, we were like, all right, we don't want to do daycare. That's just the way we were kind of rolling. And I was like, all right, radio is not the most stable industry, so I'll be the stay-at-home dad. And once I got my routine down, then I started writing for a few sites. But I got invited to this fatherhood group. We started, talking about fatherhood and all that good stuff. And I started creating the podcast there. And then I had a huge passion for fatherhood because I got to see all different forms of fatherhood, and it made me a better dad because there were certain things I might not have thought about at all. And it's like, all right, you just like different things, for example, where, if you tell your kid, like, it's okay that so-and-so doesn't like you at a fight, they might not be your friend in 10 years. So what does it matter? Okay, yeah, 10 years in the future, that might not matter. But right then and there, that's going to matter to them, right? So you can't just say like, oh, just rub some dirt on it and you'll be all set. So there's many lessons I've learned from other parents, and I felt like it's built up my parenting skills. And so I wanted to keep that going. I wanted to make sure that we had a positive perspective on fatherhood. And it's not just my perspective, it's everybody who comes on the show, everybody who shares certain stories, whether they, email me or they're like, hey, I know you do a Dad's Doing It Right column. You should showcase these guys because they're going into schools and making sure that, if there's a school that had like issues with discipline, dads would show up at different times and just making sure that like they're checking in, not just on their kids, but other kids who maybe not have a father figure. So to me, like it's amazing. You guys probably know this, especially in your field. See, there's more negativity in the news than positivity. So I'm like, we got to make sure that people know that there are good things happening in the world. So I mean, that's the main focus and elements of Art of Fatherhood, where you're praising dads and you're also making sure that there is positive stories and role models that you can learn from.
Yeah, it's interesting. What I think you've nailed it in terms of your podcast and the website. You've got entertainment, education, interesting content, and then therapeutic, right? As you mentioned earlier, dads just want to hear about other dads and what they're going through and ideas, and it resonates. And I think that's why this June, these Father's Fridays, we wanted to make something different than just divorced dads. This is dads, no matter what you've gone through, no matter what you're going through. And that's what I found so interesting about your podcast and your website, particularly. You've got several sections in here: fatherhood, media, sports, lifestyle. Talk a little bit about those sections. I kind of perused through it. There's some cool articles I want to talk about and get your perspective. And what can people find not only in your podcast, but on the website?
Yeah, so sometimes I'll do reviews, and one of the coolest things is my daughter one time asked me, my oldest, I have two daughters. I feel like I'm really like I'm behind you guys. You guys each have 5 and I have 2, right? And I'm saying like the Art of Fatherhood. I'm like, all right, maybe I don't have that much artistic ability because I only have 2 kids. But like one of my daughters was like, hey, and she loves to write. And she was like, hey, do you mind if we, work on an article together? So we would talk about, we're both sneakerheads. Well, actually, my other daughter's a sneakerhead too, but we talked about our favorite, top 5 sneaker designs, right? Or we talk about our top 5 Stranger Things characters, or movies that are coming out, or books that we've read, or something along those lines. So you'll get some feedback from my kids. One of the things I learned in this mom-dad blogging world is, your kids don't really want them to talk about you as they get older, because if people start reading it, then they'll other people might be able to have good material on them. So like, if my daughters are cool with me talking about stuff, cool, I'll definitely share that. But most of the time, it's just my view on fatherhood. Yeah. But then there's going to be sports. I'm a big, my family and I my youngest and I, we love to watch football games together. My kids and I will play different video games like NHL 22 or Madden on our PlayStation 5 together. So we might just talk about what's going on in pop culture. And then lifestyle, if there's, certain drinks that, or like cocktails that hey, parents, you should check these out after a long week or something like that. Drinking responsibly, of course, but, check out these cocktails. Or I do a lot of the website, The Onion. I kind of have instead of The Onion, it's like the Dad Onion, where I'll just make up articles about how a dad shuts down the streets so the ice cream, truck can't ruin dinner, or dads, bunch of dads in the neighborhood join this gym because they know they heard that this model is going to be coming to this male models are going to be coming into the neighborhood, moving in. And so they're all like, we got to look good, but turns out he's a hand model. So it's just some of these things where you're just kind of having some fun in the dad space. And then there's some serious articles we all know we all felt different ways and had different experiences with the pandemic. And our, what our kids felt, what our, spouses felt. So I wrote about that, but then I'll do some fun stuff in Photoshop, t-shirts, that parents would design to make their kids wear, almost because those cute shirts that kids will wear. It's grandma has the best, desserts or something, or it's you think my dad has a bad attitude. Wait till you see me. So I wanted to flip the script and make some clap back t-shirts that adults could wear to their kids if they're being too snotty. So it's just a bunch of different things that kind of pop into my head.
Yeah, it's so interesting. You mentioned some articles that you've written. I read one on Bumblebee, the Transformer. It was a great one. I mean, the point is, as I was thinking through this, particularly about guys rolling out of divorce, it's a very stressful, emotional, physically draining period going through something like this. And they get to the perspective of, now what do I do? I've got my kid, I'm thrown into chaos. And my point was get them out of that. They're stuck and find resources and ideas and, real space, which I think that's the best part is keep it real and just talk. And guys can go to your website, listen to your podcast and go, man, it seems so simple. And that Bumblebee story to me was the kind of the penultimate of simple, but guys miss it. So talk a little bit about that Bumblebee article, which I thought was great.
Thanks. So I wrote an article called Crying for Bumblebee. It came actually out this Wednesday, and it was just talking about sometimes our emotions or what we see our kids are going through, right? On the surface level, like, oh, he's crying because he couldn't get this toy. But if you actually look further into it and see why, I was crying and all that, we moved from Buffalo, New York to Illinois, like between the summer of like first and second grade. And collecting Transformers. My dad and I would like bond together. Like we'd like go to different stores to like get Optimus Prime, and Bumblebee and Optimus Prime are my two favorite Transformers on the Autobot side. And we never found the Bumblebee. And it wasn't like back then you could like Google like or buy it on eBay. Like if you didn't find it at your store, you're not getting it, right? And we're at this one pharmacy, I think it was Osco Drugs in Illinois, and my dad and I were there just hanging out and picking some stuff up. And I saw it and I was just like, can we get this? And he said no. And I remember like going back into the hotel room and just like locking myself in the closet and just crying. And my mom was like, there's something more than like this, because he usually doesn't act like this. And I just said like I miss my family in Buffalo, miss my friends. And I just really wanted this toy. And eventually they got it for me. But it was like the whole idea is sometimes this is not just for your kids or your spouse or your friends, but you could be going through something. And if you don't really take time to actually look at why you're reacting this way, then you're going to have more trouble. But if you actually kind of sit down, take a breath and being like, hey, why am I acting this way? Or why are my kids acting this way? And you have time to like spend and just think about everything that's going on in your life, you can kind of, find a solution easier than just being like, oh, I'm just having a bad day and just move on. Cause then I think it'll just like add more and more. It's almost like an avalanche, like maybe a little bit snow hill and then it keeps on getting big. And then you're like, just, swamped with just sadness, anger, and different emotions,
Yeah.
You had mentioned earlier, you feel behind the curve with us having 5, you having 2. I mean, honestly, I felt like just my first one was sometimes even harder than it is with all 5 now, because you know what I mean? Especially if it's your first one, right? And so I think, like Scott had said, you have a pencil and then you keep clicking it. At some point you run out. What if you have any tips or some examples of what you do when you get to that burnout point, especially with single dads, like Scott had mentioned, you're just so tired and it's all new and you're doing it by yourself. What are some examples or tips that you have for dads who are experiencing that burnout, or even identifying burnout in the children, because they're also exhausted when going through the divorce process?
Yeah, no doubt. Great question. So I think the biggest thing is you need to realize that if you're not 100%, maybe not 100%, like if you're not as the best, form of yourself at that week you can be, and you keep on like depleting, like, the lead's going to be pretty much out and you're like, how am I going to like move on for the next few days? You got to find out like, all right, I got to find a way to, whether it's exercise, whether it's getting lost and binging a show for a little bit, or taking yourself out to eat, or just, and especially in this dad world, there are a lot of groups in not just here in the States, but in around the different countries, where if you just kind of search, like you type in your maybe not your address, but your town or local city, and you type in dad groups, you can find ways to bond with different dads who someone might be going through a divorce or just went through a divorce, and give you some tips. But I think you need to find a way to recharge whenever way you possibly can, or go to the store and get some more lead to fill your pencil up so you can kind of move on. And in case of your kids, find the best way that they communicate. So my oldest, she and I and my wife, if we all need to talk about stuff, we'll sit down. My youngest, she does not want to sit down. She wants to go for a walk. And you have to learn that. You kind of got to get the cues. I think the biggest thing is, as a parent, listening is going to be your best skill. You got, 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. So listen more, talk less, and have the idea of seeing what they're going through and actually, even if it takes like 5 questions to get to the answer that they need to share with you, not the answer you need to get, but the answer that they need to share with you at that moment, go ahead, take 5 questions, play a game of 21 questions, maybe even do it in a fun way and not like sit down and be like, all right, we need to figure out what's wrong, but maybe just kind of do a fun game or build Legos together or do something where it's creative, but you're also sitting down and you have that moment that space to talk to your kids. But especially for dads, you guys obviously are a great resource. There are other dad organizations that might help around, the country or just around the world, where you can kind of feel like you can be included. But there's a bunch of dad groups, and more, like they're like, hey, you need someone, you just moved to the area, or you're looking for some new friends. Check us out. We're going to be doing bowling, or we're going to go to a brewery, or whatever the case may be. Just find different dad groups in your area. You're not going to like vibe with everyone, but there's going to be a few guys in the mix that you guys can make a good connection with. So
yeah,
I would probably suggest like those are the ways that, you can kind of recharge your batteries.
It's interesting as I started our podcast during COVID, and over the years, it's become therapeutic in some ways for me, and I'm married and my kids, you mentioned having more kids than you, but that just increases my chances of failure, because I'll get it right one way or the other at some point with my last one. But I think that's the key is like through your podcast, it's getting guys a resource somewhere to just hear, to ask questions, to talk, to try to figure out, hey, what are you doing, man? How do I get there? Everyone's got a situation. It's unique in its own way, but there's crossover, there's commonality, and sometimes you just need to talk. And that almost seems, counterintuitive to guys, is to get together and have that therapy, right? We're men, we can do it on our own, we'll figure it out. But that's why for me, for 3 years, it's been very, very therapeutic. And, I've gotten it right over the years. My parenting, my fatherhood style has changed over the last, my oldest is 29, right? So I've had a long road to figure this out. But, through your podcast, kind of you think through it for you, I imagine it's, you've had some guidance with your own and kind of one tip, we talk about it. If you think through it, what do you want to tell guys out there that kind of in your journey?
Yeah. So you mentioned the word fail, right? We look at that as a negative. And for me, one of my daughter's teachers in 6th grade in middle school, we had like a parent teacher night. They said like, I tell my kids the first day is like, what does fail mean? And no one really had the answer. And he's like, it means first attempt in learning. And I was like, that's amazing. And I think the biggest thing in my generation, I'm 44, and it was like, when you're growing up, it's like, you got to do the best, you can't fail and all these other things. But I told my daughters, like, I learned more on a test I failed or got a D on than I did because I mostly got A's and B's as a kid in pretty much all of like school, all the way up to like college. But I learned more when I got a D, and I'm like, what just happened? Or I got a C. I'm like, what happened? Because I looked through it. I'm like, oh, that was just a dumb error. Like, or this, I completely missed the concept of that, week of learning or whatever. Mm-hmm. And I said to them, like, I'm not asking you to be perfect all the time. The idea is like, if you keep on failing, like, all right, we got to see what's going on. But I mean, let me just say, like, of course, everyone's going to say it's like, I'm very proud of them. They get A's, pretty much all A's. My oldest got ticked off because she got a B in honors math. I'm like, calm down. That's right. You're doing good. Calm down. But I just said like the idea of it's okay to fail. And I forgot, I think it was something doing with sports. They were talking about like, they don't want to be in a room where no one has failed, because what are you going to do when, if something goes like awry and all of a sudden you're like, I'd rather be with guys and women who have failed and knew how to like change, or fix the issue right away. There you go. And it's like, all right, cool. So we sometimes have this idea that we all need to be perfect, but that's not the thing. So it's okay to fail. And it's also cool and okay to tell your kids like, hey, I'm sorry I failed, or I got mad and I shouldn't have. It's not you. I just had a busy day at work, and that shouldn't take it out on you. That's not, it's nothing you did. You just asked me if we could play, on the Xbox or play Mario Kart, and I just lost my fuse. I'm sorry. So if you show them that like, hey, even parents aren't perfect and they fail, but you're setting the example of it's okay to apologize and show that you did mess up. I think that's one of the best ways we can teach our kids as they move forward in this world.
Totally. It's the hardest thing to do. Go ahead, Jessica.
Oh, yeah. And you may have already answered this. We had a question, too, that said, one tip for a new father, what would it be if you could do one thing differently? And like I said, you might have already answered this in everything you've already shared with us, but what would it be?
Great. Yeah. Thanks for, I did see that in the comment section. It's funny when I ask people on my podcast this, it's like the last fathered question before we kind of dive into other things that person's into. I say, what's a piece of advice or a dad hack you'd offer? I would say 40% of the answer, like, don't take advice from anybody. And I'm not going to give you any advice just because you got to, you'll figure it out on your own. And it's not like cop out, but I remember it's like two things that you're going to get advice from people. If you tell them, if you're going to become a parent, everyone's going to sit you down and tell you how to parent. And if you go to Disney World, everyone's going to tell you how to go to Disney World and how to pre-plan and everything. So those, just like death and taxes, if you tell someone you're going to Disney World or you're going to become a parent, get ready and take a notebook because you're going to everyone's going to give you advice.
Yeah.
I would say go with your gut.
Yeah.
Things change as soon as you become a parent. That cliche is so true. A baby changes everything for the most part in the good ways. There's going to be stress. There's going to be am I going to able to afford this? Am I going to be able to be a good dad or a good parent? You will. If you're already asking these questions, you're already trying to be the best parent you can be. So you might see someone on Instagram having 3 kids in a stroller, nailing it, but you don't know what happened before or after that picture. Someone could be having a baby could have a big blowout and everyone's upset. No, you change the diaper. No, you change the diaper. Don't go into instead of keeping up with the Joneses, don't feel like you need to go in the Instagram world. And another thing too, depending on your schedule, if you can do this, new dads, when your wife or spouse is nursing or whatever, change the diaper. Even if there's nothing bad, just change the diaper, get up with if you can, if you're, your schedule allows it. Every family is different, but I found not just for me with my wife, but other people have said the same thing. If you get up in the middle of the night, change the diaper, then when the baby's all clean, you give back to the spouse so she can nurse and all that. That shows many things. One, you bond with your kid. 2, you're showing your wife, I'm in the, you for 9 months, you were doing everything. And obviously with the birth, you did everything. Now let me at least get up with you. So that is one of the things I would do. And then the idea of anything differently. The one thing I would know, if you have multiple kids, and you guys can, answer on this too, your first kid and your second kid are not going to act the same way.
Yeah.
My first kid loved the thing you'd put in the doorway, the door frame, and just jump, and to be great, I get to clean the kitchen now because she's jumping and I know where she is. My youngest hated it. She would cry. Even if I put her near it, she started crying. I'm all right, that's fine. So I had to hold her while I was cooking dinner or whatever. So just realize for new dads, not every kid is going to be the exact same way as your first child. So just prepare for that.
100%. I'm with you. And for me, it's I tried to make my first so perfect because I wanted to be the right dad. Right.
Right.
And now he's frustrated because he watches with his youngest sibling. He's where did the dad go?
Right.
But I've realized it, but see, here's the thing. We go to school and teachers tell you there's one way to do something, and passing is so important. And not failing, they put that fear of failing in you. And so my boys went to this high school where they intentionally fail the boys right away in 7th grade. They start getting Fs. And then they teach them, there's a good way to learn from that. And failure is okay because through failure, you're going to find successes. And so, I kind of caught on to that late, when I started having kids and realizing that that's okay to do that. And so it's really unique. It is, as you say, there's not one way to do it. That's why I love the art part of the website. It is. It's an art. There's plenty out there. I look out there and thinking, what? I don't like this art, but that's the way they did it, and it works. It sells for $1 million, right? Whatever. Yeah. So last question. I know we're out of time. Nick wants to know, you mentioned dad groups. Do you mean on Facebook or something? Or how does Nick find them, these dads groups and, wherever it may be on the internet?
Yeah, you can find them on the internet, and that's great. You can definitely go there. But also, too, using those internet sites, there's a group called City Dads Group, and they were founded in New York City, but they have ones countrywide. And there's also people listening to this worldwide. There are different groups. If you check out Dad's Doing It Right, and even if you check in in my search bar, artoffatherhood.net, dad groups, I have Australian dad sites, New Zealand dad sites, European dads groups, and all this other stuff. But yeah, I think the biggest thing is you can the cool thing is you can go on Facebook or social media, see what those dad groups are like. You can kind of see like, okay, that what they're doing is pretty cool, or like they're playing, a softball tournament, or they're going to a brewery, or they're doing a movie night, or going to play pool or smoke cigars, whatever. You can kind of stalk them, being like, do I want to mess around with these guys? They look like pretty cool guys, or I can go. So your, Facebook groups, or, social media, they'll be there like promoting their, different groups and what, meetups they might have, then you can go there. So I would just go look on the internet first, see if this is something you might be into, and then, reach out, because there's always going to be like an email, or you could DM being like, hey, saw your dad group. When's your next like meetup? And you can go from there.
Yeah. Well, I know we're out of time. Art, thanks so much for joining. I appreciate it. Jessica, same to you. Check out Art's podcast. Go to the website, artoffatherhood.net. It's filled with awesome stuff. Subscribe to his podcast. You'll get more info. I love it. Again, thanks for joining. Art, appreciate all of your time.
Really appreciate what you guys are doing this month, and just also making sure you're there for dads as well. But it's been an honor to be here. Thank you both.
All right.
Thank you.
Again, today's resource was awesome. Check it out, artoffatherhood.net. Also subscribe to the podcast. So the entire month of June, that's what we've been doing, trying to bring you these resources. I've enjoyed the entire month. Check out our normal podcast and our virtual town halls that we do every month. Go to cordellcordell.com, men's divorce, dad's divorce.com. Check it out. Subscribe to the podcast. You can go to Apple iTunes and do that as well. So until next time, have a great weekend.